Hello, leaders, and welcome to this broadcast from the Executive Network. I trust you've had a fantastic day, and whether it's morning or afternoon or evening where you are, I'm sure the day is just about to get even better. So sit tight, fasten your seatbelt, and let's go on this ride together as we get transformed by the renewing of a mind. Right, for people who are joining us for the very first time, um, if you just take a look at your screen, you will notice to your right hand corner some buttons and icons. So to the far top right hand corner, you'll see a chat button. You can always use that at any point in time to send greetings to other leaders or to share your insights and thoughts. As a matter of fact, we want to have a very interactive section so that if you agree with him with any concept or idea, just um, um, show your consent. But if you are not sure, you can always also let us know, and we will take all those feedback on board and use that to even have a better broadcast the next time we're meeting. So welcome, and I'm sure you have a very lovely time tonight, or this afternoon, or this morning, in fact, depending on whether you're joining us from the continent of Europe, or from Africa, or from the Americas. So we welcome. Um, Last week, we started a new series, which is actually meant to introduce to us some perhaps unfamiliar concept or something that we really haven't really thought deeply about. And you say, over the course of this week, I was actually thinking to myself, why is it that even though everyone seemed to know, or most people seem to know, that there is something special about them, there is something that they are capable of delivering. And I was just wondering, why is it that sometimes there seems to be a barrier, an impediment, some kind of uh, inhibition that make people not to take that next step forward to become what they know that they truly are. And this is something that I was considering very deeply. And I thought that perhaps one of the reasons that may be responsible for that are the concept that we've grown to believe. I did share a while ago on this platform that the environment in which a seed grow is actually more important than the seed itself in the context of the farming season. So if you put your maize seed into a a sandy environment, you can be sure that even though there's nothing wrong with the seed, but the environment precludes the successful growth of that seed. So it just occurred to me that maybe even more important than our physical environments are our mental environments. In other words, the things that go on in our minds, the way we've been um, educated, sometimes seem to take us a bit away from actually understanding our true values, who we are fundamentally. And it seems to me that that is one of the reasons that sometimes people who are bold, who are strong, when it comes to really bringing out the real value inside of them, they tend to shy back. They tend to pull back, and somehow something gets lost in translation. Now, that's why we want to consider a few terminologies. As a matter of fact, what we are doing on this platform is a re-education back into ourselves. I've said that a few times, and I mean every word of it, because of our fundamental belief on the Executive Network platform. We believe that everyone fundamentally is a leader. But as true as that is, we may not see that leader until something changes in the mind. And so I'm going to go on without much ado and talk about a few concepts here. Now, well, I should have a screen before this, and the first screen talks about. Let me just try and do it without my slide. It talks about the concept called the kingdom of heaven, and by that we simply means a territory where God himself presides over. Now, I'll keep it as simple as that, but I will use a more familiar concept to explain it. For people who are based in the United Kingdom or any other kingdoms around the world, you probably understand this concept a bit more. Now, let's take UK, for example, United Kingdom. And you will notice that there is the country that is called the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland. Now, that kingdom is the territory, is the physical territory, which is separate and different from the kingdom or the government of Her Majesty, the Queen Elizabeth II. So it means in context, we can separate the Queen from the country, because before the Queen, there was a king that presided over the territory called United Kingdom. So in that context, I want to present to us that the kingdom of heaven is comparable to the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland as a territory. And then when you say the kingdom of God, that is comparable to saying the kingdom of Her Majesty, the Queen Elizabeth II. So, and I'd like us to have a distinction in our minds when we're discussing this context. And as we progress, you will see how this is so fundamentally important when we're discussing kingdom leadership concepts. Because in the first instance, you notice a mixture of words in there. First is kingdom. Now, I want us to be very clear about the definition of kingdoms, because the education we've had so far gives us a particular kind of definition or concept. When we say kingdom, we normally associate it with a particular idea or concept. And that's exactly what I'm here to address tonight. That when we're talking about a kingdom, we are in fact talking about either a country or a territory, or in fact a government. Okay, so let's put that on one side. Now, we're also talking about another concept, which is the Adamic dominion mandate or Adamic dominion mandate. We're talking about the authority given to the first man, Adam, to rule over the earth. Some people call it Adam. So let's use the word Adam. Is the authority, the regency, the leadership, or the governmental authority given to the first man, Adam, to preside over the affairs of the earth. Now, the word Adam is not exactly a man. It usually means mankind. So which means every human, which is why, we're talking about leadership from a biblical perspective. So when I was talking about let them have dominion, he actually used the plural word them for English students, which means I'm not talking about one person, I'm talking about the whole species. So the word Adam actually represents all of the species. As a matter of fact, red earth, like someone brought almost model from a clay, if you like to think in that context. So I want to put those definitions as foundational building blocks for this whole discussion tonight. Now, within that definition, then we can talk about the context or the concept of colonization, which is simply the extension of a kingdom's influence to a distant territory. In other words, think about when France extended their influence over a country called Haiti. You know, it meant that Haiti was from that point on to be governed by the policies of the government of France. So let's keep that also um, firmly rooted in our minds as we progress. Now, when we also talk about the context of the fall, FALL, we're talking about the declaration of independence of earth from heaven through rebellion. Now, the word fall, as a matter of fact, is exactly what Haiti did when they said, France, we don't want you to govern us anymore. So Haiti fell out of the governing influence of France. The same thing to all the areas, all the realms that the to Great Britain had governing influence over in previous years. So you talk about some states in Africa and some other states around the world. And that's basically saying we declare independence of authority, of governance, and ability to create our own policies as distinct and different from your own influence. That's declaration of independence. As a matter of fact, that word default is also the word you use for the word sin, S-I-N, which means there is a rebellious act that's happened and we have severed relationship. Now, these concepts are so very important because as kingdom leaders, people who are to bring forth kingdom influence in our territories, in our domains of influence, we need to have proper understanding of this word so that we are non-religious in our dealings, because the last thing that the world needs more of is religion. We all know how much religions have influenced the world. As a matter of fact, more conflicts have emerged as a result of religion up until now. And you know, if you look around the world, you know how that religion is creating, you know, some kind of conflagration around the world. So now, to this extent, we also want to talk about the concept we call the divine promise, which is simply the covenant of God to redeem and restore the kingdom of heaven back to earth. You know, that is stemming from the colonization experience which earth previously enjoyed from heaven. And of course, the fall basically took off that experience, and the divine promise is simply a recolonization experience. If you understand this, we will have a unique ability to present this influence, the kingdom influence around the world in a totally non-religious views and with a degree of acceptability that is unprecedented. This is something that I've seen and I'm experiencing it when I talk to people of different backgrounds. I don't talk to them about religion because that is not what the world needs. The world needs a different kind of leadership from the perspective that was first and foremost given to earth. Right. So now, when we talk about the concept of faith, we are simply talking about one's belief system based on conviction as to what is considered to be truth. Now, what that simply means is that whatever you believe to be truth and you are convinced about, that's exactly what truth is to you. And that is what you have faith about. And to that extent, you can tell that everyone on earth has faith either in a deity or a non-deity. In other words, some people believe that there are no deity, that there is no God. So you can call them agnostics, you can call them atheists, or whatever you call them. But it's just a faith in a deity or non-deity. So faith, belief, conviction, and truth are connected with that in that context, that whatever you believe, whatever your belief system is, that is exactly what defines your faith. And if you are so convinced about that, that becomes your truth. Now, I want to introduce a concept of default system. And I will talk a bit about my background. I have my first degree in computer science, and I did a bit of computer engineering and the science of computing. And one of the unique things that I did see in that experience is that if you have your computer, and most of us, we do, probably using a computer now, or even your phone is a computer. Sometimes when you're working your phone and everything seems complex and totally unresponsive, there's always something that you do. Everyone knows that, and I can almost hear people echoing that. You do something they call reboot, or you restart the system. Okay. Now, if you want to be safe in your convictions, here's a suggestion. Always take a journey backwards. I did say this in one of, I think, probably the premier meeting, that truth is not ahead, it's always behind. It's always right in front. And I said that in the context of someone who is trying to repair something on his electronics. No matter what you do, if you bought that electronics 5 years ago and you packed all the carton in your loft or in your store, what you want to do when you want to repair that system is to go back to the loft or to the store and dig out the box where the manual is, and you go back to reunite your mind with the mind of the person that gave you that electronic. His name may be Sony, his name may be Philips, his name may be Itachi, but what you want to do is to reunite your mind with the mind of the person that gave you that piece of electronics, so that you can restore the electronics back to what the manufacturer said to be true. So that's why I said that if you want to be safe in your conviction, don't forget what we were saying on previous screen, that faith is simply one's belief based on conviction. So if you want to be safe in your conviction, always take a journey backwards to the default state. Now, reset or default is the manufacturer state of the product. So there is always a particular button that you probably see on your computer, if you can spot it. It's called a reset button, or in some of electronics, it's called a reset button. When you press that button, it sets your computer back to the state that was first delivered to you when you first received the computer. And something that happens after you receive your computer. You keep on browsing, you keep on installing one program or the other on it to alter the default state. And so when everything becomes so convoluted that you don't know what to do anymore, you are always advised to reset. So what we're attempting to do in this particular series of broadcasts is to attempt to return to the default state of the manufacturer. Now, default goes back to the mind of the manufacturer, and you never get right as you advance in error. That is so true, because if someone makes a mistake, let's say you're traveling from your home to the office or some other place, and if you set out on the wrong road, hopefully without a sat nav, well, the further you go, the more you are in deviation from your destination. And so what you want to do is to retrace your step back and go through the identified route, or the route that is advised. So, and that's why I'm saying that you never actually get right the more you continue to advance in error, because time does not change error to truth. Time does not change error to truth. If someone failed an exam a while ago, no one will say, oh, now that you're a bit older, well, we can just defer to your age and make you pass the exam. No, time does not change error to truth. Now, if your concepts are wrong, everything built on that concept will be wrong. And that is a given. People who are into building engineering, they know this. If there is a major fault in the foundation, you can always predict what will happen to the building. That sometime in the future, there will be cracks, major cracks, that depending on the enormity of the fault in the foundation, might be as pronounced as um, the fault detects. So everything built on a wrong concept will likely be wrong. Truth, therefore, is the original information, the default. Truth is simply the manufacturer's specification. Why? The manufacturer knows his product or our product, and that product was built in with an objective mindset that says this is how this works. So to return to default, or to correct errors, therefore, there's something that we normally do. You can press delete on your computer, and that simply moves the error into the recycle bin. But if you want to get rid of the error altogether, that's the command we normally use on a computer. You press Alt Shift Delete, and that information does not just go, if it flies out of the computer in entirety, and you may not actually recover it again. So return to default sometimes require pressing Alt Shift Delete, and that's probably something that may begin to happen as we go through this, because certain fundamental ideas may be challenged, and what we want to do is to open our mind to default ideas, original ideas. Right, now I want to present a thought that the theology of the 21st and 20th and 21st century church seem to have deviated from the principal theology of the Bible. By the way, everything that I'm teaching on this concept is as I learned them from my teacher, from my mentor. And these are thoroughly researched ideas. And I want you to have just an open mind, consider them, and I'm sure your mind begins to really make some kind of shift, or call it a kind of reset. Now, there's a reason why you say this. It's because the kingdom concept is the foundation of all scriptural revelation. What do I mean by that? The more you understand the kingdom concept, the more the Bible becomes a demystified book to you. As a matter of fact, there's a reason why people always talk in terms of mysteries when they open the scriptures. And I used to say that until I began to understand kingdom concept, and I thought, right, this is no longer a mystery to me. I can understand this, because once you understand kingdom concept, you begin to have an unveiling. When we talk about truth is not something that is invented. It's something that exists that you may just not be aware of. Okay, if you have a cup on your table, just imagine that you have a cup on your table, and that cup is covered with a napkin. Now that cup is full of water. Somebody can come in from the hot sun, just return in the afternoon about 2 p.m., right in the summer heat, and the person is so thirsty, and it so happens that there is no water anywhere else in the house. Now, the water in the cup on your table is covered, and that person may not recognize that there is water in that cup unless he does something, unless he unveils that cup to see that actually what is longing for, water, is actually in that cup. So truth is simply something that has been veiled, that you are just coming to terms with. That's what the word revelation, which means we're just revealing what was always there, what was already there. So revelation is not something new. It's something that was hidden, that's just kept away from the eyes of the person who is just seeing it. Right. Now, leadership concept will be distorted if the kingdom concept is misunderstood. Why? Just go back to the beginning. What was the Adamic race given? Let them have dominion, which means a word called kingdom, actually, by the interpretation of it in Greek and Hebrew terms. But we'll come to that hopefully in the next broadcast. But these are foundational things that I would like us to consider, because we're going to build on this as we progress. Now, the kingdom concept is necessary for correction, or for the correct interpretation and application of scripture for every area of life. We're arriving at something, but just look at that and take it very deeply. As a matter of fact, if you like, you may take notes, or you may just want to listen to the broadcast again. But kingdom concept is necessary for correct interpretation and application of scripture for every area of life. Why do we say this? Now, if I'm speaking to my friend and we're talking about something, maybe an idea that's maybe a particular subject. Now, a third friend, one of our friends, comes along and perhaps just hears the last statement to say, oh, that's correct. Now, the question is, what is correct? The other friend may not know what is correct unless he understands the context from which we are speaking. So, in the same way, when you're looking at the scriptures, unless you understand the context in which the scripture itself is written, you just may not, or you may not correctly interpret the scriptures. And you know that when you're talking about application, the most important component of knowledge or education is actually application, because knowledge that cannot be applied is useless. So application of knowledge is more important than just gathering of knowledge. So correct application of information, therefore, is dependent on obtaining correct concepts. Because if the correct concepts are missed, well, you can almost guarantee that the application may also be incorrect. Right. Now, let's briefly look over again. This will probably be some kind of repetition with some addition. We're looking at the power of ideas. And just for the sake of repetition, for the sake of emphasis and indoctrination, you notice that the most powerful force on earth is an idea. The most powerful force on earth is an idea, was an idea, is still an idea. Why? Everything on earth is a product of and began as an idea. I won't beat that too much, because I know that by now you're probably in agreement with me on this. Ideas are more powerful than death. Why? Because ideas actually transcend the carriers of the ideas. Because once the idea has been transferred into the mind of another recipient, the original carrier can leave the scene and the idea actually still carries on. Now, if your ideas are wrong, it's a given that you will impregnate other minds with those ideas. Now, it also follows that if your ideas are right, you will transfer those ideas into the minds of those that you interact with. Now, of course, we know this. Speech is one of the media of transferring ideas. Of course, writing is also one. That's why we write books, and there are books that have been written that exist in our library. If you go into the library and look at the encyclopedias, they've been written for decades and decades ago. Some I was looking today on. I was trying to consider a song, and this tune I was looking at was actually written in 1765, and you can imagine. The man who wrote that song is long gone. As a matter of fact, you will probably have the seventh generation of that family on earth now. But the song that man wrote, a very beautiful thing, is still present. And you can look at most of the songs that we sing now. How great thou art. These are songs written decades ago. And those ideas still persist. Why? Because they've been transferred away from the mind of the person that carried it originally into other media of expression, books, speech, tunes, and so on and so forth. Now, talking about transference of ideas, you will notice for people who are used to baking that you don't need a lot of yeast to make the dough rise. You just need just about the correct amount and the dough begin to rise. So the import of this is that you don't need a lot of wrong ideas to create trouble. You just need just enough. And you can imagine, why do we have, as it were, a convoluted world? We have conflicts of ideas all over the place. And that's because certain ideas have been transferred from certain minds into other minds, and those ideas persist. And the ideas are coming together as cultures are merging into one another, and so the ideas are clashing. So there are conflicts of ideas, and you know the effect. It's prevalent all over the place. Now, ideas, that's interesting about ideas. Ideas cannot be destroyed. Now, they either submerge or re-emerge. And I'm sure people who are fashion conscious will notice this. In the past, you have certain styles that when you look at it, you say, oh, that's so 1960s. But that fashion seems to come about again, and you wear it again and it looks like new. Now that's the interesting thing. When you bring out an old idea from the archive or from submersion, it seems like it's new, because ideas, they emerge, they submerge, and they re-emerge, because they are not actually destroyed. It makes me it reminds me of my physics class, where it says that matter can neither be created nor destroyed. Well, the physicists will know more about that, but I will stay with the second part of that statement, that ideas cannot be destroyed. As a matter of fact, there are no new ideas on earth. Just from the example of the fashion that I mentioned just now. In the past, it was in fashion to have just above the knee skirts. And that was like a 1960 concept. Now it went a little further down, and now it's back up. So it's not new, it's just an old idea reimagined. And that's why one of the first century king of the nation of Israel said, what is actually what has been, and there's nothing new under the sun. Now, you can tell what that means. So if an idea which was formerly old came back as new, and you are a student of history, and you knew the trend of that ideas and where that idea, where it was concluded at, you can predict the future of the reimagined idea. Let me say that again. If you knew how a previous idea went, if you knew the good or the trouble that it caused before it submerged, if that idea ever emerge again, you can also predict its future. Why? Prophecy is simply repeating history to the future. You want to write that statement down. Prophecy is simply repeating history to the future. Prophecy is telling the future what history said. That's a direct quotation from my mentor. Prophecy is just simply telling the future what history already said, because there's nothing new under the heaven. So if you knew how it went the previous time, you can also say, well, I can prophesy to you. What you're doing will lead exactly to that previous place. So a person who understands ideas is never impressed with ideas, because he can tell. He just needs to go back to archives, to the history books, and say, what happened in 1959 when this happened? I'm pausing for emphasis. Now, a bad idea can only So this is interesting. So let's say you have an idea that is saying, no, this is not a good idea. What do you do with it? Do you fight that idea? No, because an idea cannot be destroyed. As a matter of fact, if you get rid of somebody who has a bad idea, what happens is that you will be multiplying that idea. It's a concept that is known all through history. You know, the Emperor Nero in the first century, when it was, well, and the emperors before him, when they were eliminating Christians in the county of Rome, they found out that the more they um, punished these people, they treated them very badly, the more their ideas were multiplying. So what happens if you kill somebody who has an idea? You create a concept that's called martyrdom. That's how that concept was birthed. You multiply the idea. So instead of trying to destroy a kind of an idea, you'll be better served by replacing a bad idea with a better idea. So a bad idea can only be replaced with a better idea, and hopefully the original one. Okay, and now that talks about the importance of education, because education is simply the transfer of idea from one mind to another. It's exactly what's happened to us all through life. When somebody said, as a lady, this is exactly how you sit down. This is exactly what you wear and what you don't wear. As a gentleman, this is exactly what you do and what you don't do. We learn them directly or indirectly. So education or teaching is the distribution or redistribution of ideas to replace old ideas or to correct erroneous ones. Teaching is the redistribution or distribution of ideas, because the idea may not be there in the first instance, and so you are distributing it first hand. But if the idea was there and it wasn't the right one, redistribution is required to replace the old idea with a new one. So in that context, you will notice that teachers occupy a very important place in the whole framework of distribution and reinforcement of ideas, because teachers actually distribute ideas. They are distributors of ideas. That was the context of rabbi, or the context of rabboni in ancient times. Rabbis are master teachers who have mastered a particular school of thought, a school of ideas, and they transfer those ideas to their students, who are called disciples. So discipleship was simply the process of retrieving the idea in the mind of a master teacher, so that you are either gaining a new idea or replacing an old idea with a new one. So your teacher will transfer, this goes without saying, your teacher will transfer the content of his or her mind to yours, either wholly, in full, or in part, or in a distorted form. And I'm hoping we can talk a little about what happens when an idea is actually transferred in a distorted form, because a lot of things could happen in the process of transferring an idea from one mind to another. You're asking yourself a question: why are we going through all this? Until your ideas change, then everything remains exactly the same, because life does not change until the ideas, our convictions, actually change. And you never actually have faith for what you do not know. You only have faith for something that you first know and are convinced about. So before you listen to a teacher, check the source of the education of that teacher. Why? That teacher is simply transferring an idea from a point of collection to a new mind. That teacher is an agency of knowledge transfer. So if you check the source of that teacher's education and you don't like that source, Well, you can be well advised to change your teacher. Now, an idea begins not in your own mind, but in the mind of whoever instructs you. Because you think, normally you think, if I ask a question, where do ideas actually emerge from? You say, in my mind. No, that is partly true, but not fully correct. Because the idea that you have in your mind is exactly what was transferred to your mind by someone who taught you somewhere at some point, at some place. So an idea begins in the mind of whoever instructs you. So it's worth checking who or what is the source of one's education. I remember when I was a child, one of the when I was trying to learn to read a lot of novels, the first book I heard was Mills and Bones. And you can imagine, well, I'll confess, I didn't go past the first page because I got bored quickly. Now, if all the idea of a person about relationship is collected from Mills and Bones, you can imagine exactly how that person will fare. The person might get lucky, maybe, but the chances are very slim. Now, let's talk about the process of progressing ideas. An original thought is a precept. Because last week we talked about an idea being a conceived thought. And we didn't reinforce this idea that, as a matter of fact, there is something that precedes thought, and that's what we call precept. Precept is exactly the source of thought, and we'll look at this a bit more in the coming slide. A conceived precept is an idea. That word precept might be a bit, so for some people, it might be something that we've not really thought about deeply, but we'll look at it a bit more as we go on to actually understand what we mean by precept. A conceived idea is a concept. In other words, when you conceive your idea, it becomes a concept. When you conceive a thought, or a thought that is original mean first, is actually what you call a precept. Now, when that precept is conceived, it becomes an idea. I was trying to do some kind of research, and I was finding out that actually the ideas that come to our mind are actually neural pathways in the mind that are aligned to a particular ordered pattern or distorted patterns. But we leave that to the neuroscientists. So a conceived idea is a concept. And when you accept that concept, it becomes a conviction. And that's exactly the point at which things become either very good or very dangerous. Let me talk about just very quickly an application of all of this information. When you meet somebody, no matter what that person is, no matter what that person is saying, you are not going to be arguing about that person's concept, because you know that the concept is not the first thing. That's not where the thought of that person began. Because, unless we look at the application of some of these things, they will sound like a lot of theories. And that's exactly what we don't want to happen. We want to see, how do we apply this valuable information? We said the other time that the most valuable part of knowledge is application. So how do we apply this? Now, you can choose to not to argue with people about their convictions, because you want to know what brought about that conviction. Now, somebody might say, I don't like beef. Now, it will be so wrong to be arguing with the person that, oh, beef is actually good for you. No. If you follow this sort of thought, you say, well, I understand you don't like beef. Now, could you tell me what happened? Why are you a bit averse to beef? Now, what are you doing? You are going behind that conviction into the concept that formed that conviction. And say, wow, tell me more about it. The further you dig, the more you are going back to the idea that formed the concept of not liking beef. So, and now I go on to say that an accepted conviction becomes a belief. So, and this also goes back to the thought I've just said just now, that you don't need to argue somebody's belief, because whether you like it or not, someone believes what he believes. Now, instead of arguing that belief, what you want to do is to go back to what is behind that belief, which is a conviction, and you want to go further back still to the concept that formed that conviction, which formed that belief. Because a lot of things happen in that process, and sometimes it could be a whole lifetime repetition where that idea is repeated to that person over and over until the concept is fully formed in that person's mind and the person accepts it to be a belief worthy of retaining in the mind. And you know, like we said last week, when a person accepts his belief, that becomes an ideology. That ideology forming what we call the mentality of that person, or the psychology, the way that person thinks. Now, when that happens, because it's not just a belief, it's a belief that has now transitioned into a thinking pattern. When that happens, that becomes that person's deified knowledge. Let me use that word. Deify is the person exalts that idea as being absolutely correct without any doubt, and you can't change that. And the person will not submit that idea to you cheaply. An accepted ideology is actually what becomes philosophy. Philosophy is what you call, or is what leads to what you call a way of life, or you call it lifestyle. Now, you notice a word there that's invented by my mentor, and it suggests that if that idea is good, that can create lifestyle. But if the idea is actually erroneous and destructive, it may actually birth a death style, because it might begin to destroy life because of that idea. So your philosophy is either becoming a lifestyle or a death style, a life-giving style or a life-destroying or life-taking style. And that's why when we see somebody who has a particular lifestyle, instead of going into quickly coming to a conclusion and saying, right, this is totally wrong, blah, blah. No, you want to go back. If we are actually interested in helping people, if you truly value people, you want to go behind that idea. Now, let's say a child is struggling in school. Now, that state of mind in life is an aftermath of something. So what you want to do is to go behind why that child struggles in school, and to see exactly something that has settled into a pattern of thinking in the mind of that child. That's just by way of application. Now, let's talk about the power of precept. From the previous slide, we can tell that precept is actually more important than concept. Why is that? We'll dig a bit further into this. Precept is more important than concept. Why? Precept actually produces concept. Your concepts are born out of the original ideas that you have in your mind. Because if precept is what births thoughts, and thoughts conceived produce ideas, and ideas believed or accepted become concept, then we know that precept actually comes before concept. Now, let's look at that word precept. Because in these studies, I really don't want you to pay attention to concept. I would like to suggest that you pay attention to precept. Now you see why this is vital. Precept has a stem, which we call a prefix, and that prefix is pre, P-R-E. And in all of our English studies, we know what pre means. It simply means before or the antecedent. It means something that precedes something. And the word sept, which is actually the word, actually means idea or thought. So if you put that together, you come with this idea that precept simply means the preceding idea or the thought before the idea. The preceding idea or the thought before the idea. Now let's look at concept. Concept also has a stem or a prefix, which is C-O-N, con. Now, when I was doing music a few years ago, there's one word that we were taught in Latin. It's con spiritu, which simply means with spirit. So the word con actually means with or together. So concept, therefore, simply means an idea that has come together or an idea that is conceived or a thought that has come together, has fully come together, or has been conceived. Okay, now I want us to now see how important this is. Look at the book of Psalm 19 verse 8. Don't forget, we're talking about biblical philosophy and kingdom concept of leadership. The book of Psalm 19 verse 8 says, the precepts of the Lord are right, giving joy to the heart. In other words, once you know the precepts, you know you are right, and you walk about happy as a lark. Why? The precept precede the concept. And if your precepts are right, and especially you know that the source of your precept actually comes from God, then you are delighted, you are happy. You can go on. You can be bold. And I say that it is more important to know the heart of God than to know the hand of God. Now look at that, the item 6 there. It says that the precepts of the Lord are right, giving joy to the heart. The word heart, I'm going to test now whether you are religious or you're not a religious person. If I ask you to point to your heart, now I can see through the airwaves. Let's try and see where you're pointing to. Now, if you point to your chest, then I know you are truly religious, because what you have in your chest is simply a blood pumping machine. That's not the heart. Your heart, by definition, means the center of the mind. So you call it the heart of the mind. It's the same context when you say, let's come to the heart of the matter. You're saying, let us come to the center of the matter. So your heart is the center, the base of the mind. So that's why I put in bracket that it is more important to know the mind of God than to know the hand of God, because religious people are more interested in knowing the hand of God. They want to see the miracles of God. They want to see the great works of God. But people who are after precept want to know, what were you thinking before you made the sun? Tell me the precept of the sun, because once I know the precept of the sun, then I can understand the sun and I can go about confidently, because I know exactly what gave birth to the sun. So precepts are more important than concept, because as a matter of fact, concept might be too late because the whole idea might have come together and you are not able to decipher the precept of it. So you want to know the precept of the matter before you know the concept of the matter. And this is so important for kingdom leaders, because I tell you something, our world needs not to hurry hastily forward, but to walk intently backwards to the original information. Look at this scripture. Psalm 111 verse 10 says, "The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. All who follow his precepts have good understanding." In other words, once you know the precept, you know you have good understanding. Because good understanding, you can have some kind of understanding when you understand the concept, but not good understanding. Because good understanding, that's why you have that adjective there, qualifying understanding. Good understanding only come about by knowing the precept. So when you know the precept, you have good understanding, and that precept is actually the foundation of wisdom. That's the reason why you see the word beginning of wisdom. You'll be wondering, is it that wisdom has progression? No, it's saying the foundation, the first step in wisdom is to understand precept. Now, look at the other verse in Psalm 119 verse 4. It says, "You have laid down precepts that are to be fully obeyed." In other words, the manufacturer himself, as what he did first was to lay down the precept, because he knows that once you understand the precept, you can go about with boldness, with confidence, happy. Now, once you learn the original precept, you know you cannot go wrong. The original precept bring you back to default. Don't forget, we are talking about going back to reset after you've done all sort of things with your computer. The original preset actually restore you to default. And you know something? At default state, you and the manufacturer are on the same page. You are one again with the manufacturer. That's why Psalm 119 verse 15 says, "I meditate on your precept and consider your way." If I say a man's ways are good, I'm saying that the man's lifestyle, the man's mindset, the man's approach to life are good. So what does that mean? If you meditate on the precept and you get the precept, it means you can understand God's mindset. And that's exactly what is needed, because when the manufacturer said, let all of them become leaders, then there was something he had in mind. If you can capture that, then you are and the manufacturer become one and the same in mind, in thinking. You know, you wonder a scripture that says that, "For my ways are not your ways, and my thoughts are not your thoughts." Now, I like to suggest to you that that statement is a statement of regret and displeasure, because what you want from your child is that your child understands just like you do, so that you can delegate a lot of things to the child. You can say, "Now you handle this or that for me." So the manufacturer wants his delegated agents to be one in mind with him. So that's why I say, "I meditate on your precepts, and so I can consider your way. I can understand your lifestyle." Look at verse 40 of that same 119 of Psalms. It says, "How I long for your precepts." No, there's a reason why the man David was different among every other person in scriptures. As a matter of fact, from biblical references, you will understand that the only one man that Jesus identified with was David. He did not identify with Abraham, which is why when they say, "Look, Abraham is our father," he said, "Before Abraham, I was." In other words, tell me something else, I came before Abraham. But each time somebody says, "Son of David," he responds. Why? That's a totally different, that we can use a whole 1 hour to talk about that. But he identified with David, and one of the reasons is this: David always wanted to know what was in the mind of God. That's why he would say something like this: "Oh God, when I consider all your works, what is man that you have made him so and so. In other words, the man David was always interested in the heart of God rather than in the hand of God. David was always interested in the original thought that was in the mind of God. That's why God said, David is actually after what is in my heart. That's exactly the word, is a man after my heart. It means this man wants to know what I have in my mind. He wants to be united with me in my thought. So that same man said, how I long your precept. Preserve my life in your righteousness. We're rounding up at this point. Now, the same Psalm 119, 45 and 46 says, I will walk about in freedom, for I have sought out your precept. In other words, once you know precept, you can then walk about free. As a matter of fact, look at the next verse. It says, I will speak of your statutes before kings and will not be put to shame. Once you know precept, you can give counsel to kings, to prime ministers, to leaders. You can give counsels to CEOs, to executives of corporations. Why? There is something that somehow they did not find in all of the leadership studies in all of the schools that they went to. And those are precepts. They are not concepts, they are the original information. And I can tell you something. If you come to terms with how valuable this is, and I know I'm convinced that people on this particular broadcast are beginning to really take interest in knowing precept rather than just sticking with concept. Your reasoning can be disputed. This is why you want to know precept, because your reasoning can be disputed, but principles are indisputable. Precepts are indisputable. Information is good, but precepts are better. Precepts are original principles of truth according to the source, according to the original source. Precepts are the original version of truth. You can have many versions of truth, but the original one is called precept. Now, let's recap here. So why must we learn and relearn kingdom precepts? Precepts, don't forget, they are ideas, original ideas. And concepts are conceived thought, or the picture that you have captured in your mind, or a definition that you have put together in your mind based on that idea. Now, what that suggests is that if the precepts are wrong, then something happens. The concept will be wrong. And what we want to do on this series is actually to relearn kingdom precept, the original precept. Because if we don't, we can go to leadership schools in America or all of Europe and all that, but the best we'll be getting are simply concept. But what we want to learn is the precept that precedes those concepts. I know something. If your precept is wrong, then you also end up with a wrong picture. Why? Because if the idea in your mind, if you bring that to a particular idea, you can totally misconstrue that picture by imposing the picture you have in your mind on that picture. You call it superimposition of ideas. Now, if your precepts are wrong and your concepts are wrong, then it follows that your conclusions will be wrong. And you know what? When your conclusions are wrong, there's a term we use for it. We call it misconception, or we call it misunderstanding. And that is really dangerous. And we are going through all this because we have a fundamental belief at the Executive Network that every human is a leader. And that leadership is in the area of their gifting. Every human comes with a gift, and they have the authority to exercise leadership in that area of gifting. So when you know correct precept, you know you can be right without being loud or strong. And that's exactly what I want to present to us tonight. That let's go for precept, and be right rather than being loud or being strong, because you can be loud and be wrong. You can be talking about a concept that is untrue and be sweating and be shouting and use the best resources in the world for it. So I present to you, ladies and gentlemen, that precept move us towards being right rather than being strong or being loud. This is the conclusion of this broadcast, and we're going to progress in here into the core of leadership, kingdom leadership concept, and we'll be laying a lot of foundations on this. But I will encourage us to go through this broadcast of tonight, because these are so very fundamental for what we shall be considering in the near future from next week. So God bless you. Thank you for coming again. And I hope that from this point on, precepts will become your better friends. Good night, good afternoon, good morning, where you are, and God bless you.